Welcome back everyone to the weekly mailbox. Your chance to ask me questions about anything you would like. Formula 1, Formula E, motorsports, anything in between. And my goodness, ladies and gents, have we had a crazy, spicy week in the world of Formula 1. And the reason I say spicy is the Chili Master has moved to Ferrari. Carlos Sainz will leave McLaren. Ricciardo takes his place. There's a seat at Renault, my goodness. And on a personal level, with the news of Sainz, well, the first news actually of Vettel leaving Ferrari at the end of the season, we hit the top 20 on YouTube trending. P18 we got up to. The following day with the Daniel Ricciardo news, we got to number 8 on trending. So all of you that have joined over the last few days, welcome. This is the Mailbox, the weekly Q&A. I hope you enjoy your stay on this channel and welcome to the team, formally and officially from me. But we'll jump into the first question. And actually, I probably just should mention, if you want to ask questions, comment section down below, Twitter, Instagram. But the first question, it's in the title, comes from Broomhandle Formula 1. Is Sainz the right man for Ferrari? Can he win a race next season? And there were so many questions talking about this because this is the hot topic at the moment. And I think a lot of you that have been here since day one, since that first season I covered F1 in 2018, I'm a big fan of Carlos Sainz. I always thought at Toro Rosso, he wasn't given his opportunity. I always felt that he was a little bit hard done by when Verstappen got the nod ahead of Carlos Sainz all the way back in 2016. I understood at the time, and I still think it was the right decision, but I felt, poor guy. He would have really benefited from another season against Max, I really do believe. And when the team decided to, Red Bull this is, go with Gasly instead of Sainz again, I was quite baffled actually. But in 2019, destroyed the midfield, 6th overall, finished just one position behind Sebastian Vettel. I mean, that's how good his season was last year. Yes, there was a bit of a points difference, but I think his reputation really bounced back last season. I think a lot of people that maybe didn't rate him too highly in seasons gone by finally saw what he was capable of. And up against Norris, a driver that many people think is a future world champion, I'm still a little bit 50-50, but he's certainly got a lot of promise and potential. Sainz really asserted himself as that number one. Do I think he's the right man for Ferrari? Well, I'm sure tomorrow evening, if you're not aware, I'm going to be streaming with Sean the F1 Word at 5 o'clock, and I'm sure we'll have a big debate then. But I think from a Carlos Sainz perspective, you're biting Ferrari's hand off. You're going for this no matter what. Even though you're pretty much the number one at McLaren, this is Ferrari. This is an opportunity to win races straight away in 2021. McLaren, there's no guarantee when we get a big regulation change in 2022. From a Ferrari perspective, it's not really worked having two drivers with equal status. I think at the beginning of last year, Vettel was number 1, Leclerc was number 2. And though they both got victories, there was certainly plenty of squabbling, and Ferrari took a gamble. They'd never really implemented 2 number 1 drivers before. So I think by going with Sainz, he's not a clear number 2, I would personally say. I think he's not on the level of Leclerc, but I think certainly if he's comfortable in the car, if we're at a weekend where it's a circuit he particularly likes, he's a driver who's very impressive in wet conditions. I think, yeah, to answer your question, I certainly think he can win Grand Prix. And I think it'll be like Hamilton and Bottas, Leclerc and Sainz. I think on his day, Sainz can really give him a run for his money, but I think Leclerc will still be the better of the two. And I think for Ferrari, there are options like Ricciardo on the table, but there's still going to be those headaches, those upsets that we saw last year with Vettel and Leclerc. And I think if they were going to go for Ricciardo, they would have just kept Sebastian Vettel, if that makes sense. And there's still, at the time of recording, a hell of a lot of unknowns on just why Sebastian Vettel left, where he's going to be next season in 2021. And I think until we have those answers, it's hard to really say why Ferrari have gone with Sainz, but I would say it's to bring back that number 1 and 2 and have a driver who can still win, but not cause too many upsets, if that kind of makes sense. So I hope I've answered your question there. Moving on to question 2. no real surprise at what the questions are today. This is a bit of a double header, this one. And it comes from Had Was Here and Racing Rhino. We've got two questions, but it's pretty much two birds, one stone. So Ahad asks, McLaren are no longer going to be engine customers to Renault. What would this mean for the French team since nobody is customers to them anymore? And Racing Rhino asks, who on earth is going to take the Renault seat? This may be an obvious question, but I have no idea. There are just too many possibilities. And I've linked these together because, like the Sainz question, this question was so popular today. Hundreds, it seems, talking about Renault. And I'm going to kind of answer this as a package deal because there were so many questions. I think the Renault seat is one of the best seats left on the grid at the moment. Yes, there could be one at Mercedes. That's probably going to be better. There may be one at Red Bull by the time we get to the end of 2020, but probably not. So I think this Renault seat, the fact that McLaren won't be a customer, if Renault get it right if their engine all of a sudden becomes the front runner on the grid, they're going to be the only team with that engine. Also, they're a team that we know are playing with fire a little bit, whether they're staying or going with Formula One, but they've certainly put in a hell of a lot of resources, and I really do think people forget that every single season since they came back to Formula One in 2016, they've done better and better and better in the standings. It was only last year they went backwards, and even then, though they were quite a way off McLaren at the end of the day, McLaren were using Renault engines. So the engine isn't dreadful. And I think Ocon is a solid driver. But I still think they need a special driver in that other car. So now becomes the question, who should take that second Renault seat? And in one of the streams we did the other day over on Twitch, had a bit of a discussion about this. My gut feeling, though I think Alonso would be a fun option. You know he's going to cause so many dramas in the F1 paddock, and I would love to see him return. And I think he'd be a good option for Renault, actually. I really do. I think his reputation is probably a little bit worse than what it actually should be. I think Alonso actually brings a hell of a lot of benefit to a team and is still a brilliant racing driver. But apart from that, I don't see Vettel taking it, and I think a really sensible option could be Pierre Gasly, a driver who was given a short opportunity at Red Bull, didn't take it. He didn't do well at his time at Red Bull, but since going back to Toro Rosso has proved he's got speed, comfortably beat Danny Kvyat, and again, you can say, oh well, Kvyat beat Ricciardo and Ricciardo beat Vettel, and do those weird, silly linking things people do. I'm not trying to go down that route. But Gasly definitely came into his own in the second half of the season, and he's a driver, I believe, still with a hell of a lot of ability, and is an option where he doesn't want to be at Toro Rosso for the rest of his career. Is Albon going anywhere? Probably not. Is Verstappen? Definitely not. So he's going to be looking for an out, and Renault, who arguably bought in Ocon because he was a French driver, two French drivers, my goodness, they'll be in heaven. And yeah, I think for Gasly that'd be a perfect place to go. A place to really redeem his career. He'd be up against Ocon, and I think that could be a really nice pairing between the two of them. But I would love to see Hülkenberg back on the grid. I really would. And actually, now Vettel's moved, there's, I would say, 3 or 4 teams that Hülkenberg could potentially go to. So I'm happy on that front. But I think, yeah, my money would be between Alonso and Gasly if I was going for it. And I definitely think Renault are a team that could still surprise a hell of a lot of people when we get to the new regulation changes, and maybe just even in 2020. They had a good-looking car in winter testing. I'm not talking about race wins just yet, but I certainly think they're a team that are kind of going under the radar a little bit, which again surprises me over the last couple of years. Moving on to question number 3, comes from Felix M. Huge over on Instagram. How will a shorter season affect the development of junior drivers in their respected series? I won't take too long on this question because I know quite a few of you aren't that interested in Formula 2s and Formula 3s. And I kind of wanted to quickly mention this because realistically, in terms of calendar length, it's not going to affect it that much. We've seen a proposed calendar for Formula 2 and Formula 3. It's still about 8 to 10 races long, which isn't massively different than what we normally have. They're still trying to do the 2 races in the weekend system, so that's going to be relatively unchanged. But I wanted to quickly mention this because whilst I think the shorter season in their own championship won't make much of a difference to them, I think a shorter season in Formula 1 is going to, especially drivers I think at Haas and Alfa Romeo, so Grosjean, Magnussen, Giovinazzi, maybe even Raikkonen, I think it's going to encourage teams to keep those drivers, and it's going to encourage those drivers to stay an extra season. So I think for driver or whoever wins Formula 2, they're not allowed back in Formula 2 if you win the championship. That could really hurt their progression into Formula 1. And it might mean a lot of doors that would have been opened. I think probably Grosjean would have moved on. I think Raikkonen would have definitely retired. Maybe they'll just get an extra year. Go until the end of 2021. They might not. And I think I might do a video next week doing my predictions for 2021 driver lineups. But I certainly think it's going to be harder for drivers like Schwartzman and Schumacher, and drivers even without any kind of academy system and academy backing. I think it could be difficult for them to work their way onto the Formula 1 grid. So I just wanted to quickly mention that because I haven't really mentioned Formula 2 over these past few weeks. Question number 4 comes from Mr. Random Guy. How do you feel about the Silverstone doubleheader? Do you think they will need to change it up the second time round, or will they keep it in the same format? If not, what changes do you hope they make for the second race? And thank you for your question, dude. I know you ask them most weeks, and I thought it's about time I finally included one of them. Awesome news. Silverstone is one of the best tracks on the calendar. No British bias. It's always just really, really good racing. Just like Spa is, just like Monza is. It's a great circuit. Austria, I think, also is planning on doing 2 races. So the first 2 races of the year will be Austria. Then the next 2 will be Silverstone. And just for clarity, they're trying to do it over 2 weekends. So let's say on the 13th of July, you have Silverstone race 1, and then the 20th, Silverstone race 2. And that's how they're roughly, from my knowledge, trying to sort out that. And I think with everything that's going on, that is totally fine. Do they need to mix it up? I don't really think so, to be totally honest with you. There was a bit of talk, a bit of chatter, and a bit of natter through the paddock saying that they might do a reverse layout. It's not going to work at Silverstone. It's not going to work at Austria. Maybe it could be fun to me. I don't know how you feel about this. And again, I don't know if it would quite work in modern Formula 1 cars. But they still have in place at Silverstone the other start-finish straight. So there's technically 2 paddocks at Silverstone. Maybe that could be quite fun. Doing one on the national pit straight and one on the international. That could be quite cool, and starting the race in different places. I don't know. That could be quite unique. But apart from a little quirk like that, I don't really think they need to do it. I would much rather have 2 races at Silverstone than one, let's say, in Vietnam, where it's half street race, half circuit, and with everything going on, travelling around the world, it's not feasible. So I know some people were a little bit frustrated. I personally love the news. I think it's fantastic. And again, from a selfish point of view, any racing at the moment is fantastic. And the fact that they've got the go-ahead to do this, I think is quite a positive thing going forward. And our final question today, sorry if we're a little bit quicker than normal. I'm a little bit busy this weekend, but we'll be back to normal with quite a bit of content next week, don't you worry. Our final question, our audience participation question. I want to know your thoughts in the comments below. And it's a cheat question. I'm sorry. I've already answered it, but I want to know your thoughts. Who do you think will be the next Renault driver for 2021? It comes from Harry Pizza, but like I said earlier on, this has been the most talked about question. I cannot believe this has been the most talked about question. I suppose I said earlier, Alonso or Gasly would be my 2 favourites, but I'll just throw in a few more because I've included this question twice and I don't want to cheat you too much of a Mailbox episode this week. Sebastian Vettel, I discounted him earlier, and I still think from his statement of why he's leaving Ferrari, I don't see Renault being a suitable option. For Renault, I think he'd be great. And again, with Ocon, I think it'd be great for Ocon to prove himself up against Sebastian Vettel, like Leclerc was able to do last year at Ferrari. But for Seb, moving from Ferrari to a midfield team, who again I think could do well over the next few years, it's too big of a gamble for me. And I think for Vettel, a team like Mercedes, if he really can squidge his way in there, or even an Aston Martin, if he can squidge himself in there, are going to be more attractive options. But maybe, if it's the only option, maybe Vettel does go there. They do have a couple of youngsters in Formula 2. They've got Christian Lundgaard, I think he's Danish, like Kevin Magnussen, I think, off the top of my head. Sorry, Lundgaard fans, but he's going to be in his first full season of Formula 2. Liking his progress in Formula 3, but not too sure if he's quite ready for Formula 1 just yet, or at least in 2021. The most likely from that academy will be Guan Yu Zhou, Chinese driver who did exceptionally well in Formula 2 last year. Didn't get any wins, didn't win the title or anything crazy like that, but several podiums, couple of pole positions. I think he could do well this season. So if he can win the title, or at least get in the top 2 or 3, maybe they take a gamble. But I still think they need a proven Formula 1 driver. Maybe they'll even bring back Romain Grosjean. I would, if Haas let him go, I'd be very happy with that. But audience participation, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. And that will do it for this week's episode of the Weekly Mailbox. Thank you all for watching. Again, if you're new this week, thank you for joining. The support at the moment has been a bit insane, but it's been one of those weeks in the world of Formula 1. Comments, Instagram, Twitter, you all know the drill for questions next week. And I hope to see you all in the next one.